Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthak Empire adjusted his ceremonial war helm as he entered the human diplomatic station orbiting Earth. The massive alien, standing nearly 8 feet tall with chitinous armor plating and 4 muscular arms, had come here with a simple question that had puzzled the Galactic Council for months. The humans had joined the galactic community just 2 years ago, and their military prowess had quickly become legendary. In every conflict, every skirmish, every war game, they emerged victorious. Their tactics were unpredictable, their soldiers fearless, and their strategies often bordered on insane genius. Yet when the Council had tried to understand the source of their power by studying their gods of war, they found something impossible. Humans claimed they had no god of combat. Every species in the galaxy had at least one deity dedicated to warfare. The Vorthak worshipped Krexthal the Bloodthirsty, whose followers painted themselves in the blood of their enemies. The crystalline Zephyrites prayed to the Shard of Endless Battles, a living weapon that guided their hands in combat. Even the peaceful Melodians had harmony through conflict, a goddess who taught that sometimes violence was necessary for peace. But humans insisted they had no such divine patron. This was unthinkable. How could a species become the galaxy's most feared warriors without divine guidance? Zethkar was greeted by Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's chief xenotheologist. She was a small woman by human standards, barely reaching his chest, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her appearance was deceiving. Zethkar had read her files. She had served as a combat medic in 3 human wars before becoming a scholar. "Ambassador," Dr. Chen said, offering the traditional human handshake. "Welcome to Harmony Station. I understand you have questions about our religious practices?" Zethkar's translator rendered his clicks and growls into standard galactic. "Indeed, Doctor. The Council is perplexed. Your species demonstrates combat abilities that suggest divine favor, yet you claim no god of war. This contradiction troubles us deeply." Dr. Chen smiled, an expression that other species often found unsettling but which Zethkar had learned indicated friendliness among humans. "Would you like some coffee? This might take a while to explain." As they settled in Dr. Chen's office, overlooking the blue marble of Earth below, she began what would become the most important theological discussion in galactic history. "You're not wrong that humans excel at warfare," Dr. Chen said, pouring the dark aromatic liquid that humans seem to require for cognitive function. "But you're making an assumption about why. Surely your warriors pray to someone before battle," Zethkar insisted. "They must invoke some deity's name when they charge into combat." "Oh, they do invoke names," Dr. Chen replied, "but not the names you'd expect." She activated a holographic display showing footage from recent human military exercises. Zethkar watched as human soldiers moved with fluid precision, their teamwork seamless and their tactics brilliant. "Listen carefully to what they say," Dr. Chen advised. Zethkar enhanced his auditory receptors. Instead of war cries to battle gods, he heard something else entirely. Soldiers calling out names he didn't recognize, but names that seemed to drive them forward with incredible determination. "For Martinez!" one soldier shouted as he charged a position. "Remember Johnson!" called another as she provided covering fire. "Don't let Williams down!" a third urged his squad. "These are not gods," Zethkar observed, confused. "No," Dr. Chen agreed. "They're fallen comrades, friends who died in previous battles, squad mates who sacrificed themselves for others." The ambassador's mandibles clicked in puzzlement. "But how does this provide divine strength? How do the dead grant power to the living?" Dr. Chen leaned forward, her expression growing serious. "That's where you misunderstand us, Ambassador. We don't need gods to give us strength in battle. We draw our power from each other." She switched the display to show human military training, soldiers supporting each other through impossible challenges, medics risking their lives to save wounded comrades, officers putting themselves in harm's way to protect their troops. Every human soldier fights not just for victory, but for the person beside them. They know that their comrade will die before abandoning them, and they'll do the same in return. This bond, this trust, this love for each other, it's stronger than any divine blessing. Zethkar found this concept almost incomprehensible. In Vorthak culture, warriors fought for personal glory and divine favor. The idea of fighting for others, especially at personal cost, seemed like weakness. "But surely you have gods of war," he pressed. "Every species does." "We have gods," Dr. Chen acknowledged. "Many different ones, depending on your culture and beliefs. But if we ever had a specific god of combat, they became irrelevant very quickly." "How is such a thing possible?" Dr. Chen stood and walked to the viewport, gazing down at her homeworld. "Because humans became too good at war for any god to keep up with us." She began to tell the story that would shake the foundations of galactic theology, a story about a species that had started like any other, with gods and goddesses of war to guide their battles. But as humans evolved, as their conflicts became more complex and their weapons more sophisticated, something unprecedented happened. They outgrew their war god. "Imagine," Dr. Chen said, "a deity whose domain is combat with bronze weapons and simple tactics. What happens when their worshippers invent gunpowder? What happens when warfare becomes about logistics and supply chains rather than just personal courage?" She showed images from human history. Ancient warriors with spears and shields, medieval knights in armor, soldiers with rifles, and finally modern troops with advanced technology. Our war god couldn't adapt fast enough. Every time we revolutionized warfare, they fell further behind. Bronze Age tactics don't work in modern combat. Divine strategies based on personal duels become useless when battles are fought across continents with weapons of mass destruction. Zethkar processed this information with growing amazement. "Your god of war became obsolete." "Exactly. And worse than obsolete, counterproductive. Following ancient divine combat wisdom would get you killed on a modern battlefield. So we stopped listening." The implications were staggering. Zethkar had never heard of a species rejecting their war god for being inadequate. Usually, gods adapted to their worshippers' needs, or the worshippers accepted divine limitations. "What happened to this god?" he asked. Dr. Chen's expression grew thoughtful. "That's where the story gets interesting. According to our legends, our war god didn't just fade away like most abandoned deities. They tried to keep up with us." She activated another display, this one showing artistic depictions from various human cultures, a figure in armor that changed styles rapidly, a deity wielding weapons that evolved from swords to guns to energy weapons. Every time we developed new ways of fighting, our war god scrambled to learn them too. But gods aren't built for rapid change. They represent eternal principles, not evolving techniques. The more they tried to match our pace of innovation, the more they lost their essential divine nature. What do you mean? Think about it. What makes a god divine? Their eternal, unchanging nature? Their timeless wisdom? When our war gods started desperately trying to learn every new human combat technique, updating their knowledge every few decades, they stopped being divine and started being just another student of warfare. The concept was revolutionary. A god diminished not by being forgotten, but by trying too hard to remain relevant. "The final blow came during our world wars," Dr. Chen continued. "Conflicts so massive, so complex, so technologically advanced that even our adaptable war god couldn't process them fast enough. While they were still trying to understand trench warfare, we were already developing radar. While they mastered tank tactics, we split the atom." She pulled up footage of massive human conflicts, showing the scale and complexity that had overwhelmed divine comprehension. Our legends say that our war god finally admitted defeat. Not in combat, but in relevance. They couldn't guide us anymore because we had become better at war than they were. Zethkar sat in stunned silence. The idea that mortals could surpass their own deities in the god's own domain was beyond his understanding. "So where is this god now?" he finally asked. Dr. Chen smiled mysteriously. "That's the most human part of the story. We didn't abandon our war god completely. We gave them a new job." "A new job?" "They became our god of peace." The ambassador's forearms gestured in confusion. "How does a war god become a peace god?" "Because," Dr. Chen explained, "having mastered war so thoroughly that we surpassed divine expertise, we realized something important. The best way to end conflicts isn't to fight them better, it's to prevent them from starting at all." She showed images of human diplomatic missions, peacekeeping forces, and conflict resolution programs. "Our former war god now helps us find alternatives to violence. They use their ancient knowledge of what causes conflicts to help us avoid them. When you understand war deeply enough, you start to see how pointless most conflicts really are." Zethkar struggled to process this information. "You're saying that your mastery of combat led you to not fight?" "Not exactly. We still fight when necessary. But our war god, having learned that they couldn't keep pace with our military evolution, discovered their true calling, helping us recognize when fighting isn't necessary. The implications were profound. Humans hadn't just surpassed their war god, they had evolved their entire relationship with conflict. This is why you're so effective in battle," Zethkar realized. "You're not relying on divine guidance that might be outdated or inappropriate. You're thinking for yourselves." "Precisely. Every human soldier is trained to adapt, to think independently, to work with their team to solve tactical problems in real time. We don't wait for divine inspiration. We create our own solutions." Dr. E. Chen returned to her desk and pulled up tactical analyses of recent galactic conflicts where humans had participated. "Look at how other species fight," she said. "The Vorthak charge in straight lines because Krexthal favors direct assault. The Zephirites use crystalline formations because their shard teaches geometric perfection. Everyone fights according to ancient divine patterns. And humans? We fight however the situation requires. Sometimes we charge, sometimes we sneak, sometimes we retreat, and let our enemies defeat themselves. We're not bound by divine doctrine, so we can use whatever tactics work best." Zethkar studied the tactical displays with new understanding. Human military actions that had seemed chaotic or contradictory now made perfect sense. They weren't following a religious pattern. They were responding to circumstances. "But how do your soldiers find courage without divine support?" he asked. "What drives them to risk their lives?" Dr. Chen's expression softened. "That's the most important part. We fight for each other, not for glory, not for divine favor, but for the person next to us who would die before letting us down." She showed video of human soldiers in action again, and this time, Zethkar understood what he was seeing. The fierce protectiveness in their eyes, the way they positioned themselves to shield their comrades, the desperate determination when a teammate was in danger. "Love," he said, the concept alien but recognizable. "Love," Dr. Chen confirmed. "A human soldier knows that their squad mate will charge into enemy fire to save them. Knowing someone loves you that much, how can you do anything less in return?" For the first time in his life, Zethkar began to understand why humans were such formidable warriors. They weren't fighting for abstract divine principles or personal glory. They were fighting for the most powerful force in the universe, their love for each other. As their first meeting concluded, Zethkar realized that his simple question about human war gods had revealed something far more significant. Humanity hadn't just abandoned their war deity. They had evolved beyond the need for any external source of martial strength. They had become their own gods of war, and then transcended that role entirely. The implications for the rest of the galaxy were just beginning to dawn on him. 3 weeks after his initial meeting with Dr. Chen, Ambassador Zethkar found himself standing in the observation deck of the human vessel Unconquerable Spirit, watching the most unusual military exercise he had ever witnessed. The Galactic Council had arranged for a joint training mission between human forces and the elite warriors of 5 different species, ostensibly to improve interspecies cooperation. In reality, everyone wanted to see human combat techniques up close. The exercise was taking place on Kepler 442b, a harsh world with varied terrain that would test every aspect of military skill. Each species had sent their finest warriors, blessed by their respective war gods and confident in their divine superiority. The Vorthak contingent, led by War Captain Drexamol, had spent 3 days in ritual preparation. They painted their exoskeletons with sacred combat symbols and offered blood sacrifices to Krexthal. Their weapons hummed with divine energy, and their 4-armed forms moved with the fluid grace of religious certainty. The crystalline Zephyrite had arrived in perfect geometric formation, their bodies resonating with harmonic frequencies that their shard of endless battles had taught them. Each warrior was a living weapon, their crystal skin able to deflect energy blasts and their limbs sharp enough to cut through metal. The gas giant dwelling Nebulans floated in their environmental suits, their tentacles weaving complex patterns that invoked the protection of their storm god of war. Their ability to phase partially out of normal space-time made them nearly impossible to hit in combat. The insectoid Hivetar moved as one mind, their queen mother of battles coordinating their thoughts across vast distances. No individual among them was particularly dangerous, but their collective intelligence made them devastatingly effective in large numbers. Finally, there were the energy beings known as the Luminol, who existed as pure conscious light and whose war aspect could burn through any material substance with focused thought alone. Against these divine warriors stood 30 human soldiers from the 3rd Ranger Battalion, looking almost comically under-equipped by comparison. Captain Maria Santos, the human commander, wore standard combat armor with no religious symbols. Her weapons were conventional projectile rifles and explosives. She had offered no prayers, performed no rituals, and invoked no divine names. Her soldiers looked relaxed, almost casual, as they prepared for the exercise. "This should be educational," Zethkar murmured to Dr. Chen, who had joined him to observe. "Indeed it will," she replied, but her tone suggested she found something amusing about his comment. The exercise began at dawn. The scenario was complex. Each team had to secure 3 objectives scattered across the planet's surface while preventing the other teams from completing their missions. Points would be awarded for objectives captured, enemies neutralized, and tactical innovation. The exercise would continue until only one team remained capable of fighting. The Vorthak struck first, as was their way. Drexmol led a thunderous charge across the northern plain, his warriors roaring prayers to Krexthal as they advanced on the nearest objective. Their 4 arms allowed them to carry both heavy weapons and close combat blades, making them formidable at any range. The Zephyrite responded by forming their sacred geometric attack patterns, their crystalline bodies creating a mandala of death that began systematically destroying everything in its path. The mathematical precision of their movements was beautiful and terrifying. Meanwhile, the Nebulans phased partially out of existence and began infiltrating the eastern objective, their tentacles passing through solid matter as their storm god granted them ethereal form. The Hive-Tar established a base camp and began spreading across the landscape like a living carpet, their collective mind processing thousands of tactical variables simultaneously while their Queen Mother of Battles guided their strategy. The Luminal ascended to high altitude and began raining pure energy down on anything that moved, their war aspect burning through armor and shields alike. And the humans disappeared. For the first hour of the exercise, there was no sign of human activity. The other species fought each other with divine fury, each convinced that their gods would grant them victory. The Vorthak clashed with the Zephyrite in a spectacular display of brute force versus crystalline precision. The Nebulans phased through Hive-Tar positions, disrupting their collective coordination. The Luminal burned everything equally, caring little for the distinction between friend and foe. Then, quietly, things began to go wrong for everyone except the humans. The Vorthak war party found their communications jammed by equipment they couldn't locate. Their charge faltered when their lead warrior stepped on what appeared to be solid ground and fell into a perfectly camouflaged pit lined with sharpened stakes. No divine blessing could protect against traps they couldn't see. The Zephyrite's geometric perfection was disrupted when small explosive charges, placed with surgical precision, shattered key warriors at exactly the right moment to collapse their formation. Their shard couldn't guide them against attacks they couldn't predict. The Nebulans discovered that their phasing abilities had limitations when they found critical equipment booby-trapped with electromagnetic pulse devices that forced them back into normal space at inconvenient moments. Even their storm god couldn't help them against technology they didn't understand. The Hive-Tar collective found their coordination breaking down as human snipers, invisible and patient, began picking off specific individuals whose roles in the hive mind were apparently more important than they had realized. Without their Queen Mother's guidance reaching all units, their tactical superiority evaporated. Most impressively, the luminal energy beings found themselves under attack from weapons that shouldn't have existed. Humans had somehow created portable devices that generated focused gravity fields, forcing the light beings into smaller and smaller areas where their energy attacks became self-defeating. "How?" Zethkar whispered as he watched the systematic dismantling of 5 divinely guided military forces by 30 humans who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. "Study them," Dr. Chen suggested, enhancing the observation deck's sensors to focus on human positions. For the first time, Zethkar got a clear look at how humans actually fought. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare. The human soldiers moved in small groups, but their coordination was unlike anything he'd seen. They didn't maintain rigid formations or follow predictable patterns. Instead, they flowed like water around obstacles, supporting each other with an intuitive understanding that seemed almost telepathic. Sergeant Jake Miller was pinned down by Zephyrite crystal fire when his squad mate, Corporal Lisa Park, appeared from an impossible angle and provided covering fire that allowed him to retreat. She hadn't been ordered to help him, hadn't received divine guidance, and hadn't followed any tactical manual. She simply saw her friend in danger and acted. Private Tommy Chen, no relation to Dr. Chen, found himself facing 3 Vorthak warriors alone when his explosives failed to detonate properly. Instead of retreating or calling for divine aid, he used his understanding of Vorthak psychology to trick them into charging into each other, then escaped while they were untangling their limbs. Captain Santos demonstrated the human approach to leadership by doing something no alien commander would consider. She gave up central command. Instead of trying to control every aspect of the battle, she divided her forces into independent units and trusted each team to adapt to changing circumstances. "Your soldiers don't follow orders," Zethkar observed. "They follow intent," Dr. Chen corrected. Santos told them the overall objective, explained the enemy capabilities, and then trusted them to figure out how to succeed. Each squad is free to improvise as needed. This was revolutionary. Every other species in the galaxy fought according to established patterns blessed by their war gods. Orders came from the top, were transmitted down through rigid hierarchies, and were followed exactly as given. The idea of giving soldiers the freedom to interpret and adapt was unthinkable. But it was devastatingly effective. The humans weren't just winning through superior tactics or technology. They were winning because they thought faster and adapted quicker than anyone else. When the Nebulans learned to counter electromagnetic pulse traps, the humans switched to thermal mines. When the Zephyrite adjusted their formation to handle explosive disruption, the humans started using sonic attacks that resonated with their crystal structure. Most remarkably, they were learning from each other in real time. When Private Chen discovered the Vorthak's psychological weakness, he immediately shared it with the rest of his unit. Within minutes, every human squad was using similar tactics against Vorthak opponents. Your gods can't adapt that quickly, Zethkar realized. Exactly. Divine knowledge is eternal and unchanging. Human knowledge is fluid and constantly improving. In a rapidly changing battle, flexibility beats perfection every time. The exercise continued for 6 more hours, but the outcome was never in doubt once the humans revealed themselves. One by one, the divinely blessed warriors fell to opponents who fought without divine guidance, but with something more powerful: absolute trust in each other and the freedom to think for themselves. The final moment came when Captain Santos faced War Captain Drexmol in single combat. The massive Vorthak warrior had called upon Krexthal's greatest blessing, making himself nearly invulnerable to physical attack. His 4 arms moved with divine speed and precision as he advanced on the much smaller human. Santos didn't try to match his strength or speed. Instead, she did something that confused him completely. She talked to him. "Your god is impressive," she said as she dodged his attacks. "But tell me, does Krexthal ever get tired of the same old tactics?" Drexmol's rhythm faltered slightly. "Krexthal is eternal and perfect." "Sure. But don't you ever want to try something new? I bet you've been fighting the same way for centuries." The psychological warfare was devastating. Drexmol had never questioned his god's teachings, but Santos's words planted seeds of doubt. As he hesitated for just a moment, wondering if there might be better ways to fight, Santos struck with a move that no Vorthak had ever seen before. She used his own momentum against him, redirecting his charge so that he crashed into a rock formation at exactly the angle needed to trap all 4 arms. "That's a human martial art called judo," Santos explained as Drexmol struggled helplessly. "It was developed by people who were smaller and weaker than their opponents, so they learned to use their enemy's strength against them. I don't think your war god knows that one." The exercise ended with all 5 alien forces neutralized and all 3 objectives under human control. Not a single human soldier had been seriously injured. In the aftermath, as the various species tended their wounded pride and tried to understand what had happened, Zethkar found himself in deep conversation with War Captain Drexmol. "They fight without honor," Drexmol complained, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "No divine guidance, no sacred rituals, no proper forms. It's chaos." "Is it?" Zethkar asked. "Or is it something we don't understand?" He had been thinking about Dr. Chen's words for weeks now, and watching the exercise had crystallized his thoughts into something approaching understanding. "Consider this," he continued. "Your god Krexthal teaches one way of fighting. My gods teach another. Every species follows divine patterns that worked thousands of years ago. But what if warfare has evolved beyond divine comprehension?" Drexmol's 4 eyes focused on him. "You sound like you're questioning the gods themselves." "Perhaps I am. The humans showed us something today that I think we've been missing. They didn't win because they were stronger or faster or more blessed. They won because they were free to think for themselves. That evening, aboard the Unconquerable Spirit, Zethkar attended a human military debriefing. He expected to see the soldiers celebrating their divine victory, but instead found them engaged in intense analysis of their performance. "Miller, your flanking maneuver on Objective 2 was solid, but you exposed Park unnecessarily," Captain Santos was saying. "Next time, coordinate with Chen's squad before moving." "Copy that, Captain," though Park's covering fire was what made it work at all. "Agreed. Park, good initiative, but your positioning could have been better. Work on finding angles that protect both of you." Zethkar was amazed. Instead of thanking their gods for victory or celebrating their superiority, the humans were criticizing their own performance and looking for ways to improve. "Every battle is a learning experience," Dr. Chen explained when he mentioned this. "We don't fight the same way twice because we're always getting better." "But don't you ever worry about losing divine favor by changing tactics?" Dr. Chen laughed, a sound that still seemed odd to Zethkar's ears. "Ambassador, I think you still don't fully understand. We don't have divine favor to lose. We have something better." "What's that?" "We have each other. Every human soldier knows that their squad mates will die before abandoning them. That knowledge makes them braver than any divine blessing could, and more importantly, it makes them fight smarter, because they're not just protecting themselves, they're protecting people they love." As if to prove her point, Private Chen approached Captain Santos with a suggestion for improving their anti-Zephyrite tactics. Santos listened carefully, asked probing questions, and then approved a training modification based on Chen's idea. A private had just improved his unit's capabilities through initiative and creative thinking. Zethkar tried to imagine a Vorthak private questioning War Captain Drexmol's tactics. The concept was literally unthinkable. Divine authority flowed from the top down and was never questioned. "Your entire military structure is based on trust, rather than authority," he observed. "Exactly. Santos doesn't command through fear or divine right. She commands because her soldiers know she'll make the best decisions she can with the information available, and that she'll always prioritize their lives over her own career. And if she makes a mistake, then they'll help her fix it, learn from it, and do better next time. Humans aren't perfect, Ambassador. We just accept that fact and work with it instead of pretending we have divine infallibility." That night, alone in his quarters, Zethkar composed a report to the Galactic Council that would change everything. He wrote about humans who fought without gods, but with something more powerful than divine blessing. He described warriors who trusted each other more than they trusted ancient wisdom, who adapted faster than immortal deities, and who improved with every battle because they were free to learn from their mistakes. But most importantly, he wrote about a species that had transcended the need for divine guidance in warfare by developing something the gods had never possessed: the ability to love their comrades more than they feared death, and the wisdom to value learning over being right. The next day would bring new revelations that would shake the galaxy even further. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after Zethkar's report reached every member species. The ornate chamber, built to accommodate the diverse physiologies of dozens of different races, buzzed with agitated conversation in 100 languages. Representatives floated, skittered, slithered, and walked to their designated positions, all united in their confusion and concern about the human revelation. High Counselor Vexathala, an ancient being whose crystalline form had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, called for order with harmonic tones that resonated through every translator in the chamber. "We gather to address the unprecedented report from Ambassador Zethkar regarding human military capabilities and their unique relationship with divine guidance in warfare," Vexathala announced. "Before we proceed, the Council wishes to hear directly from human representatives." Dr. Sarah Chen entered the chamber alongside General Marcus Webb, Earth's highest-ranking military officer. The contrast was striking. Chen in her simple academic robes, Webb in dress uniform bearing the scars of countless battles. Both humans appeared remarkably calm considering they were about to address representatives from 1,000 worlds. "Honored counselors," Dr. Chen began, "we understand our approach to warfare has raised questions. We're here to provide clarification and, hopefully, to share something that might benefit all our peoples." The Zephyrite representative, a towering crystal formation that spoke through harmonic resonance, was the first to voice concerns. Humans claim to have abandoned their war god, yet they demonstrate combat superiority over species with millions of years of divine martial tradition. This suggests either deception or a power that threatens the natural order. General Webb stepped forward. "With respect, Counselor, there's no deception. We're actually here to warn you about something far more dangerous than our military capabilities." The chamber fell silent. A warning from the species that had just demonstrated their ability to defeat any combination of galactic forces was not something to ignore. 3 days ago," Webb continued, "our deep space monitoring stations detected something that should be impossible. Our old war god is coming back." Shocked clicks, hisses, and harmonics filled the chamber as the implications hit home. Dr. Chen raised her hand for attention. "Let me explain what we think happened. When we outgrew our war god and they transitioned to become our deity of peace, we thought that was the end of the story. But gods don't simply cease to exist when their original purpose becomes obsolete." She activated a holographic display showing energy signatures from the edge of human space. "Our former war gods spent centuries watching us evolve beyond their guidance. They witnessed us develop tactics, strategies, and technologies that rendered divine combat wisdom obsolete. Instead of fading away like most abandoned deities, they began to learn." The energy patterns on the display were unlike anything the Council had seen before. Divine signatures, but twisted and amplified in ways that violated every theological principle. "Our war god didn't just study human military development," Webb added grimly. "They studied everyone's. Every species in the galaxy, every divine combat tradition, every sacred warrior technique. They've been collecting and synthesizing military knowledge for centuries, becoming something unprecedented in galactic history." Zethkar found his voice. "What kind of war god learns from mortals rather than teaching them?" "The kind that realizes mortals have surpassed divine knowledge," Dr. Chen replied. "Our former deity discovered that by abandoning eternal, unchanging wisdom and embracing constant adaptation, they could become more powerful than any war god in history." The implications were staggering. A deity that learned and adapted would be unstoppable by conventional means. Every species' military secrets, every tactical innovation, every strategic development would be known to this evolved war god. General Webb gestured to the display, showing the entity's approach vector. "Based on current trajectory and energy emissions, we estimate arrival in galactic space within 6 standard months. When they arrive, they'll possess the combined military knowledge of every civilization in known space, integrated into a divine consciousness that can process and apply that information at superhuman speeds." The Hivetar representative, speaking through their collective consciousness, raised the obvious question. "Why warn us? Surely this entity would favor humanity above all others, having once been your patron deity?" Dr. Chen's expression grew troubled. "That's exactly why we're warning you. You see, our war god has a score to settle." She changed the display to show theological analysis data. "When we surpassed our war god's capabilities and they transitioned to become our deity of peace, they felt abandoned, rejected. From their perspective, they had been cast aside by the very people they had tried to serve. And now they're coming back with the military knowledge of the entire galaxy," Webb continued. not to protect humanity, but to prove that divine guidance is still superior to human innovation. They want to demonstrate that gods are still necessary by conquering everyone who disagreed with that principle. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives realized the scope of the threat. A war god armed with the military secrets of every known species, driven by divine wounded pride, approaching with the power to challenge the entire galactic community. High Counselor Vexathala restored order with effort. What do the humans propose? Surely your species, having dealt with this entity before, has insights into defeating it. That's just it, Dr. Chen said. We can't defeat it through traditional means. Our former war god now possesses every tactical advantage we've ever developed, plus those of every other species. Fighting them directly would be suicide. Then what do you suggest? Demanded the Nebulan representative, their tentacles writhing with anxiety within their environmental suit. General Webb smiled grimly. We suggest you learn to fight the way humans do. The proposal was revolutionary. Webb and Chen spent the next hours explaining the fundamental differences between human military philosophy and that of every other species in the galaxy. Your warriors are powerful, Webb explained, but they're predictable because they follow divine patterns established eons ago. Our former war god will know exactly how each of your species fights because those patterns never change. Dr. Chen activated new displays showing the training exercise footage. Watch how our soldiers operate. They don't follow rigid formations or predetermined strategies. They adapt in real time, support each other through trust rather than command hierarchy, and innovate constantly. But how can our warriors abandon divine guidance? Asked the luminal representative, their energy form pulsing with distress. To fight without our war gods would be heretical. You don't have to abandon your gods, Dr. Chen assured them. You just need to expand your understanding of what they want from you. She gestured to Webb, who began explaining something that would reshape galactic theology forever. Think about why your gods taught you to fight in the first place, Webb said. Was it so you could mindlessly repeat ancient patterns? Or was it so you could protect what matters to you? If following divine tactics gets your people killed while adaptive tactics save them, which choice truly honors your deities? The concept was mind-bending. Webb was suggesting that true divine service might require abandoning divine instruction when circumstances demanded it. Consider the purpose behind divine combat teachings, Dr. Chen added. Every war god ultimately wants their people to survive and prosper. If rigid adherence to ancient tactics threatens that survival, then adaptation becomes a form of worship. Over the following hours, human military advisors began working with representatives from each species, explaining not just tactics, but philosophy. They showed how trust could replace rigid command structure, how individual initiative could coexist with unit cohesion, and how constant learning could be more valuable than eternal wisdom. The transformation was remarkable. Vorthak warriors learned to question their charges and look for tactical alternatives. Zephyrite crystals discovered that their mathematical precision could be applied to adaptive rather than fixed patterns. Nebulans found that their phasing abilities became far more effective when used creatively rather than according to prescribed formations. Most surprisingly, the species' war gods began to approve of these changes. Divine entities who had remained static for millennia suddenly found their worshippers developing new forms of combat excellence that transcended ancient limitations. Your gods are proud of you, Dr. Chen observed, as she watched a mixed squad of Vorthak and Zephyrite warriors practicing human-style adaptive tactics. They're seeing their children grow beyond what they thought possible. But the greatest revelation came when the first joint training exercise between human and alien forces took place. Instead of humans dominating as before, the integrated units achieved something unprecedented: perfect tactical synthesis. Human adaptability combined with Vorthak's strength, Zephyrite precision, nebulan stealth, hive-tar coordination, and luminal energy projection created combat capabilities that surpassed anything any single species could achieve alone. This is what our war god feared most, Webb realized as he watched the exercise. Not that we would become too strong individually, but that we would learn to transcend the need for divine authority by trusting each other across species lines. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. A war god's power comes from being necessary. When mortals can protect themselves and each other without divine intervention, gods become just very wise friends instead of essential authorities. The training continued for months as the approaching entity drew closer. Each species learned to balance their divine heritage with human-style adaptation. More importantly, they learned to trust each other in ways that had never been possible when rigid divine hierarchy prevented true cooperation. When the entity finally arrived in galactic space, it found something it had not expected. Instead of dozens of species fighting according to predictable divine patterns, it faced a unified force that combined the best aspects of every military tradition while remaining free to adapt and innovate in real time. The final confrontation took place in the space around Earth, where it had all begun. The evolved war god manifested as a massive energy construct that incorporated symbols and weapons from every known combat tradition. It spoke with the combined voices of 1,000 battle hymns. "Mortals!" it thundered across subspace frequencies. "You have forgotten your place. I return to remind you that divine guidance is eternal, while mortal innovation is fleeting." General Webb, commanding the combined galactic fleet from the bridge of the unconquerable spirit, opened a communication channel. "Actually, we've learned something important while you were away." "And what is that?" Dr. Chen joined the conversation from her position aboard the diplomatic vessel Harmony. "We learned that the best way to honor our gods isn't to follow their every instruction, but to become worthy of their friendship." The entity paused, confused by this unexpected response. "You spent centuries learning our tactics and strategies," Webb continued, "but you missed the most important lesson. We didn't surpass divine guidance by becoming better warriors. We surpassed it by learning to love each other more than we feared death." As if to demonstrate this point, the galactic fleet began its attack. But instead of a traditional battle, what followed was the most beautiful example of cooperative warfare ever witnessed. Every species contributed their unique strengths while adapting instantly to changing circumstances. Vorthak warriors protected Zephyrite formations, while Nebulans provided stealth support for luminol energy attacks, all coordinated by hive-tar collective intelligence and human tactical flexibility. The evolved war god found itself facing something it had never encountered in all its centuries of studying warfare, an enemy that fought not for victory, but for each other. Every time the entity adapted to counter one species' tactics, the others adapted to cover for their allies. When it focused overwhelming force on human units, alien warriors threw themselves into harm's way to protect their newfound friends. When it tried to break Zephyrite formations, humans provided covering fire while Vorthak warriors charged in to support their crystal allies. "This is not possible," the entity raged as its attacks were countered by tactics it had never seen before. "I know every combat technique in the galaxy." "But you don't know the most important one," Dr. Chen replied sadly. "You never learned to fight for someone else instead of yourself." The battle continued for hours, but the outcome was never in doubt. A war god that fought for dominance and divine authority could not overcome mortals who fought for love and mutual protection. Every tactical advantage the entity possessed became meaningless when facing opponents who valued their comrades' lives more than victory itself. In the end, the evolved war god simply stopped fighting. "I do not understand," it admitted. its massive form beginning to fade as divine energy dispersed. I possessed superior knowledge, greater power, and divine authority. How did you defeat me? General Webb's response was gentle, spoken with the kindness humans showed to all defeated opponents. We didn't defeat you. We just showed you that there's something more important than being the best warrior. What is that? Being worthy of the people who trust you to protect them. As the entity faded away, not destroyed but transformed once again, Dr. Chen spoke the words that would reshape galactic civilization. Your true strength was never in teaching us to fight. It was in teaching us what was worth fighting for. The evolved war god's final words resonated across subspace as understanding dawned. I see. You have all become gods of war yourselves, not through power, but through love. In the aftermath, as the galactic fleet celebrated humanity's most important victory, Zethkar found himself understanding the truth about human warfare. They hadn't abandoned their war god or transcended the need for divine guidance. They had simply evolved to a point where the distinction between mortal and divine became meaningless. Every human soldier who fought for their comrades was channeling divine love. Every alien warrior who learned to adapt and protect others was expressing divine wisdom. Every species that chose cooperation over domination was manifesting divine purpose. The humans hadn't outgrown their gods. They had grown up to become equals with them, partners in the eternal struggle to protect what mattered most. As Earth rotated peacefully below and the combined fleets of a dozen species worked together to rebuild and strengthen their bonds, one thing became clear to everyone present. The age of gods commanding mortals was over. The age of gods and mortals working together as friends had begun. And in that friendship lay a strength that no force in the universe could overcome, because it was built not on power or wisdom or divine authority, but on the simple recognition that every being capable of love was worthy of protection, and every being willing to protect others had become divine themselves. The greatest victory in galactic history had been won not through superior tactics or advanced weapons, but through the revolutionary idea that love was stronger than fear, trust more powerful than authority, and cooperation more effective than dominance. Humanity had taught the galaxy the most important lesson of all. True strength came not from fighting better than anyone else, but from fighting alongside everyone else as equals, friends, and family.